Um, why don't we begin with an intention setting? Do you want to do that, or do you want me to do that?
It's really your call.
Okay. All right. I'm going to set an intention. So here's what we do. This is what we do in Heart Centered. We create what I call a cosmic sandwich. So we call in the light. And by that, I mean, we pay attention to the light that's always there. And then we ground into the earth. And then we're just like really here. Okay. So wherever you are, if you're in motion, that's cool. If you're in a place where you can just have your feet on the ground, your breathing's natural. And by that, I mean you breathe in and out through your nose. You keep your mouth closed, if that feels natural to you. And then as high in the sky as you can see, you see a point of light. And that point of light is a sun. And it's coming down directly towards you, very gently. And it's going to hover about 20 feet above your head, 21 feet. And you can make it as bright and as big as you want. And the intention here is that we're giving our awareness to the light that's always there. And all we have to do is bask. So this is life force. This is prana. This is gold. It's shimmering. This is really like a symbol for our higher self. Breathing's natural. All of our cells, all of our energy bodies are absorbing this really pure life force, this light. And then you give your attention to the earth. So maybe it's, your butt in your seat or your feet on the ground. You set the intention that you're deeply rooted into Mother Earth. You expand your awareness to include knowing that we are from the earth, we're of the earth, we're made of the Mother. And we give gratitude just to be here. And then just a breath or two and breathe your eyes open. Aware of the gratitude that we're here, we're joined for the purposes of healing and goodwill. So grateful for that. All right. Okay. All right. So this, the topic today is self-respect. And Terri, in the last conversation we had, the conversation we had about this conversation, which I have all my notes here, here's the notes I want to hit. You talked when we were last together about right versus wrong boundaries. And what inspired me about that was like, what's on my mind these days is fluidity and not being too fixed. And that dance of like, I have aspirations and intentions and I want to be present. And where that meets having self-respect and loving boundaries. So can you start us off with that? So talking about what I'm going to call our judgment and maybe even our anxiety around, is this the right boundary? Is this the wrong boundary for this situation? Yeah.
Okay, so let's just start with the premise that is a truth, that we're all very different. So the same way you're an introvert and I'm an extrovert, the same way that each of us has these different qualities, the correct for us, right? So meaning right, but not like in the big W, R, right? Like right for us.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be different because our needs are different. So where I find that my clients end up having, and the women in my courses and whatever, end up having the difficulty is a lot of us have been conditioned to not take up too much space, to not want to be a burden to others, to want to be easy, to want to go with the flow, to want to be a part of the solution, right? Naturally, in general, I find that women are conditioned and raised this way. Sometimes it's great, and other times it leads us to a lot of self-abandoning behaviors and confusion. So knowing that you can figure this out as long as you dial into, I mean, I'll teach you, of course, that's why I wrote a book, but also dialing into the way that you feel. So this is how we know. If you're like, how do we know if a boundary has been violated, or if a need is going unmet, or if something isn't really cool with you? that's how you feel. Your body will always
Mhm.
give you these signals and these clues. So think about it right now. If something happens and someone says something inappropriate, like sexually lewd, and you don't want them to, right? It's different if it's someone you would like something sexually lewd from. Um, what happens to you physically? In the moment, you may freeze, meaning you don't have the ability to say something right then and there. But there is definitely something that happened in your body that's like, hey, like, I do not like that. It can be a constriction in your chest. It could be a constriction in your throat. You might have a headache or feel uncomfortable. You might just feel super uncomfortable. A lot of times that makes us go silent, but that's the beginning of knowing what your boundaries are. A lot of times it's after the fact where we go, I really dislike that interaction, or I'm pissed. Like later on, it comes to you like, I cannot believe that person said this.
Mhm.
So there's this whole thing about understanding our, like if we break down what boundaries are, right? It's us knowing our preferences, our desires, our limits, and our deal breakers. So
Mhm.
let's just keep it as simple as that, because that definition can apply to all of the different areas of boundaries, whether we're talking about material boundaries, like how you relate to your stuff, emotional boundaries, your feelings, right? Do you have a right to your feelings? Even if someone says, I don't get why do you feel that way? That's like dumb. But that's not even what the person meant. Too
Mhm.
late, pal. Like the horse is already out of the barn. Like I already feel that way. So that is someone violating an emotional boundary. If
Mhm.
they're telling you your feelings are stupid or you don't get it, like, and our sense that we need to justify, convince, build a case for
Mhm.
our feelings. So before we even get into it, and the way that the book is laid out and the way that I teach it is so much of it is a deep dive within ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm. And we can we talk about oversensitivity? Because there's lots of times someone's going to say something and they're not a jerk, and they really are coming from love, and there's a misperception about intention. So like, how do we know when it's like we got to clean up, as you would say, we got to clean up our sense of the street, and we're being our side of the street, and we're being it's really our trigger, something for us to be responsible for.
Well, here's the thing, Dee. When we start normalizing the language of boundaries, when we speak truthfully and with kindness and with love, right? Early and often,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that thing doesn't become, right? Because, yes, are there people who are clueless? They don't know how to read a room. They might be a little bit on the spectrum where they don't see the nuances of the shift in someone's face or the tone of someone's voice. And again, we can't attribute some malicious intent to
mm-hmm,
what they did or didn't do. But those people are boundary first timers, right? This is where I categorize them. And we have a beautiful opportunity to say, oh, hey, Bob, you know what? I would really appreciate it, or I would like to make a simple request that you not comment on my clothing, my body, my outfit. I know you meant it as a compliment, but it makes me uncomfortable and I'd rather you not.
mm-hmm,
Like, there's a way. Now that doesn't, Bob might really think he was doing something nice, being like, oh, your legs look great in that skirt today, right?
mm-hmm,
He may not be trying to violate your boundaries, but if you feel violated by that, it is your responsibility to say, hey, time out on the, your narrative about my outfit every single day. I don't love it.
mm-hmm,
So back to what you said, we can't make assumptions about someone else's intention. And we can't say, well, they insulted me. They meant to insult me. Listen, if someone is not calling you names or being verbally abusive, right? We really have to go from the assumption, A, that we don't know what someone's intention is. But if they're people who are in your life, people who you care about, it's also helpful to make a generous assumption that
mm-hmm,
they don't know. But it
mm-hmm,
is our job to
mm-hmm,
then inform them. And here's the thing, when you do this more regularly, it's not a big deal. You can say these things with ease and grace
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
rather than waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting until the 101 time that Bob says something about your ass in those jeans, and then you literally are going postal on the, you know what I mean? Where you're like picking up something and throwing it at him. And we're giving people bad intelligence about us, right? Corrupted data about us when we say things like, I didn't say anything, I didn't want to embarrass him, or I don't want them to think I'm a drama queen, or that I'm like a snowflake, or I'm too sensitive. It's all of this fear of what others will think. And when you are in this process of becoming a boundary boss, you really are hardcore prioritizing what you think and believing not your story, right? If your side of the street is not clean, if you haven't done your work, if you don't know yourself, you can be activated by what someone else says or does in a way that has more to do with you
Yes.
than it does with them. So your job is to go, well, what are I don't like the word triggers. I don't even know why. I just feel like it's overused like crazy, but activation is what I like to call it, where we feel a little more hot than we need to. And there actually is a very simple way that we can clean up our side of the street. So could we talk about that quick?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I, at different developmental parts of my life, Bob could have talked about my ass and my jeans, and I'd be like, listen, and I could have responded, and I love how you say with kindness, love, early, I could have responded like, dude. And now I'm also at a point in my life where it's just like, I can see Bob and I don't have to say anything. It's just like, there's also like, there's more a gentleness. Like, I kind of see Bob's stuff. It's inappropriate. It's okay. So there's more of a fluidity around that, because I cleaned up my side of the street. Yeah. So
Yep.
talk about the easy way of, so let's define cleaning up your side of the street. One of my favorite phrases of yours is really like, this is self-responsibility, that what is mine to own, what is mine to process, what is mine to turn from pain into power or ignorance into wisdom. What's the easy way?
Yep. Well, part of it is we need to identify when we're talking about being triggered, when we're talking about being activated, what we're actually talking about from a therapeutic standpoint is having a transference reaction.
Yes. Break it down. Yeah.
So transference reaction means that you are in a current situation,
Yeah.
reacting from unresolved pain or an injury from the past. And something about this current situation reminds you, consciously, unconsciously, about something that was way painful in your past. And if you're still being activated by this, it tells us that that needs some cleaning up, right? That potentially needs your attention to go, that's interesting. So how do you know what it might be? How do you know? Well, you know it's happening because the way that you respond, you might get really mad really fast. You might even later be like, holy crap, like my response to that, because if you're someone who isn't more timid, if you're someone who's a little more forceful, you might be like, what the fuck, Bob? Like you might actually have the big experience, sort of the volcano experience. So we have these questions that I've come up with over 2.5 decades of being a therapist. Like my whole job was, how can I make this stuff accessible and the most efficient? What is the fastest way? Because you are smart. I was like, everyone doesn't need to be in therapy for 30 years like me. I love it. That's why I'm in therapy for 30 years, not because I have to be, because it's a luxury. But we don't have to wait to have the satisfaction or to build these tools to up level our life experience, to have more joy and less pain, to have more abundance and less scarcity. All of those things, according to me, have to do with you being masterful around boundaries, which includes effective communication, right? Being truthful about how you feel and what you are once your side of the street is cleaned up. So back to the transference reaction. Long way around the barn to get back to it, which is when you have that situation, and you can even bring to mind right now, all of you who are here live, if you're watching this afterwards, bring to mind something right now where you're like, why does that person or that situation just bug the crap out of me? Why it is so, makes me so mad
Mhm.
What is it? Especially if it's a repeated situation. And then we think about that person and we go, okay, here are the questions. Who does this person remind me of?
Mhm.
Right? That's the first question. And don't worry, I'm giving you guys something, and that'll be included on the little downloadable guide that I'm giving you, is the 3 Qs way to do it. So who do they remind you of? Now, when I say that, that doesn't have to be that they may physically, but it doesn't have to be. But there's something that's familiar about this person. And then say, how, where have I felt like this before is the second question. And then
Mm.
the third question is, how is this behavioral dynamic, the way I'm interacting, the way I'm approaching them or they're approaching me, how is that familiar to me?
Mhm.
And that could be familiar to you simply because you witnessed it with your parental impactors, you witnessed it somewhere else, right? It doesn't have to, or it could be you. Like you could have been in a dynamic that is familiar with a punitive parent, let's say. And then suddenly you find yourself with girlfriends who are super judgmental of you. And you're
Mhm.
like, why am I always like scurrying to try to get Betty's approval? Why is Betty always like thinking what I'm doing is wrong? Like in our friendships, in our love relationships, we
Mhm.
have this tendency, I'm going to get back to this, don't worry, but
Mhm.
there's this tendency to repeat. So,
Mhm.
Freud calls it repetition compulsion, right?
Mhm.
Within systems.
Mhm.
It's not that we consciously want to repeat painful things. It's that somewhere we want to work this shit out.
Mhm.
So the tendency is to repeat. Okay.
As esoterically, I would say it's the lesson that we are not the wound. So we identify with the wound and we magnetize to us people to just poke at the wound and say, "You're the wound. Look at it. Look at it. Look at it. Look at it." To you say, not only am I not unworthy, I am actually worth itself. Like you have to just so break on through. Not only am I not ugly or too much of this or too much of that, I am beyond all of that. So we just keep magnetizing and you realize you're not that at all. You're actually like divinely contrary to that. Yeah.
Right. I love that. All right. So so how does this help you? You asked those questions, and then I added a fourth one because I thought if that wasn't clarifying enough for some folks, because sometimes they're so different, the last one is when I'm in that interaction, when I'm thinking about that person, when I'm about to interact with them, who do I become and who do they become metaphorically? So you may become your 10-year-old self, and they
Mhm.
may become your punitive, mean parent. Or
Mhm.
you may become the punitive, mean parent, and your partner may become your 10-year-old self if you are, taking on that role. Why does this matter? It matters because we don't want to be interacting in our current life,
Mhm.
being fueled by the past and being fueled by unresolved injuries or pain from the past. So there's something that you can do. You go back and go, oh my God, I can't even believe this. So I had a situation with this where it was a boss of mine who I was going into therapy every week and being like, and it was my internship when I was in grad school. And I was like talking about the guy who ran the place. He was this famous addiction doctor, MD, written books. And I was like, oh, he's such a douche. Like, I hate this guy so much. He's so cold. He's so judgmental. So rejecting, like all these things that I had interacted with him very little, which I believe my therapist kind of knew. And
Right.
she was like, you want to tell me one more time all the things about Dr. Washington? I was like, yeah. She's like, how would you describe him? So I described him. I was like, he's tall, handsome. I mean, he's like Brooks Brothers suit wearing, Wall Street Journal reading, probably drinks martinis on the weekend. I know he plays golf. She was like, Tara, who did you just describe? I was like, oh my God, my father. How did I not see that?
Dad, yeah.
Daddy issues. And I'd had tons of therapy at that point. But what was amazing, that experience actually led me to create this strategy for my clients, because once I was aware of it, I started seeing it with every single person. I was like, oh my God, they're having their Dr. Washington moment, but they wouldn't know what that was if I didn't give them steps to figure it out. I realized that this is incredibly common and that there is a direct route to the healing of this. There is a direct route so that we are present in our life. But what Ruth, my therapist, said to me at the time is she was like, Tara, do you understand why this matters? And I was like, I think I do, but tell me anyway. And she was like, because if you continue to relate to your boss like your 10-year-old self and like he is your unavailable, judgmental, scared, you're afraid of him father, he's never going to see how smart you are, how capable you are. You will never be your adult self with him, because every time you're around him, you are unconsciously turning into a 10-year-old. And I was like, oh my God, that's the best reason in the world to not want to continue this. Not to mention it felt not good to go to work every day and be afraid, because every time I saw him, I was like, I would like dive into the bathroom to avoid him, which is of course ridiculous now. But it isn't, because it was so real for me. So what do we do with this information once you get it? First of all, I would say probably half of the compulsion to repeat, or half of this idea of being transported, right? Transference is like being transported to an earlier experience, goes away. Because for me, there really wasn't more to process. I did talk to my therapist about, like, is there more about my dad? I feel like I've talked to him about him for like 25 friggin' years, but maybe there is. It was that I was unaware of what my conscious and my unconscious mind was doing. And clearly the 10-year-old in me needed some attention, which I was happy to give her. So part of it is you just go, oh, I keep attracting unavailable partners. When you go, let's say you do this and you go, wow, this is amazing. I have, they're always unavailable. They're unavailable in some way. And for me, even when I thought I figured out the unavailable partner thing, I was like, I'm attracting men who are warm and the opposite of my father. They're verbally affectionate. They're so loving and amazing because they're all from other continents and European, and they have a whole different way of being. My therapist was like, P.S. they live on another continent, Terri. Like, you are in a relationship where you still are left with the same feeling.
Yeah.
I'm alone. I'm lonely. I'm longing the same way I was as a child. So you guys who are coming up with whatever your answers are, like, oh my gosh, half of the compulsion to repeat it is gone once you take it from the basement, which is your unconscious mind, to the main part of the house. So you can do that with any situation where you feel this way. Keeping in mind, just because you had a heated response to something, just because you might have had a transference, that also doesn't mean that Bob is not a dick. Like, it doesn't mean that what you experienced in real time now might not be real. It's just how you will handle it, communicate about it, approach the person changes when you can stay in your adult self.
I want to say two things. So to the community, we're going to take questions. If you want to sprinkle your questions in, go for it.
And hold on, when you sprinkle them, one sec, when you sprinkle them, put a bunch of question marks in front of them, and then whoever is here will grab them and put them somewhere for us.
Spoken like a Zoom pro. What I wanted to say to that, this is what I want to sprinkle on top of that is, my habit has been, I can see what's in the basement. I can see what's in the subconscious. So I just want to say again, like, being awake and being healed is about bringing the unconscious to the conscious. You putting the light of your awareness on what we haven't looked at yet because we haven't wanted to or whatever. But my experience, and this is like really, I would say in the last year or so, is I would see what's there, and then my immediate response would be to criticize what was there. It's like, I overreacted. I projected. I had a transference. I treated her in a way she didn't deserve to be treated because she reminded me of my fifth grade teacher. I'm putting a story on. I should be more involved in this. And it's just like salt on the wound. So I would say my greatest source of growth has been, first of all, I'm committed to seeing what's in the basement, and to meet it with loving kindness. I mean, this is what the Buddhists would call metta. It's like, there you are. That's cool. That's transference. Wow. You just lashed out. You're scared. You just shrunk. You just said something you didn't mean to say. Come, I have room for you. There's another popular term right now in the whole self-help space. It's up there with triggering, which is like reparenting yourself. I don't know if I'm down with that term, because I don't need to be my own mother. I need to be my own Danielle. Like, I need to be just awake. Sometimes I'm my mother, sometimes I'm my own lover, all of that. But just, you meet it without judgment. And it's like extra healing sauce right then and there.
Yeah.
You can see more clearly. It doesn't stick to you like a barb, and you can make the next best move for yourself, on behalf of yourself and on behalf of the other person. Yeah.
Right.
So self-compassion. Yeah. Yeah.
Indeed.
Let me grab some questions here. So I want to go back to, so Andrea's saying, this is good. There's lots of nuance in this. So like Danielle, if I'm able to see Bob and Bob's stuff and have space for that, but I know that other women may or may not be able to speak up for themselves, do I have any responsibility to speak up for those who can't or won't? What do you think of that?
I mean, I'm really into you sort of sticking to your own side of the street.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily myself um, want Bob, unless I really know Bob and we're friends. Like, I don't really want Bob talking about my ass. You know what I mean? Like, necessarily. So most likely I would probably say something, even if I use humor to say it, right? A lot of times I use humor when I'm drawing boundaries, but I say it, right? The person gets it. I don't feel compelled to humiliate Bob. Like, I don't need to like annihilate him, but I can be like, hi, have you heard of Me Too? Like, do you understand what's happening, Bob? That maybe my ass should be off the table when it comes to what you want to talk about or whatever. Listen, I'm from Jersey. I would say it different than most people probably, unless you're from Jersey or Staten Island. You know, there's a particular style.
You could call it the Jersey way and the Canadian way. It's very yang, it's very yin. Yeah, yeah.
It's correct.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like because I'm a psychotherapist, so much of my focus is on you taking care of you. And when you get to the point where you really are, only then can we really lead. Only then can we help other people. But it's almost like feeling compelled to do it for the others. That just feels codependent to me. It feels like something. So standing up, yes. For yourself, yes. Does it set a good example? Yes. If you weren't going to do it so that the other one who can't say it feels like I don't know. Like I'm on the fence about the answer to that, other than I know that if you feel like you need to stand up, I want you to stand up. If you feel like you need to say something, I want you to say something. Did I answer it? I think I did.
Yeah, I'm down with that. Also, we can't make assumptions about how Bob interacts with other people, the chemistry between two people. You know, we can't make assumptions that it's not the next woman's opportunity to exercise her voice. Just, yeah, grace in all things. Okay.
Wait, I love that, Dee, because you know what? We don't know
We don't know
what
I
that
mean,
person needs to learn.
you
Right?
use the term I think generous assumptions. Just be generous. We don't know. We just don't. We don't know. The ego wants to know. The ego wants us to think we know everybody's issues and where they stand on everything and how they're going to affect everything before and after that. Because the ego, it cannot rest with uncertainty.
Yes.
It wants to keep us divided. And the important part here is like, that wanting to know actually keeps us out of the moment. It keeps us out of our hearts, and it creates division between us and somebody else. We don't know. Generous assumptions, loving assumptions. Okay.
And people will also tell you who they are, right? So you have boundary first timers, and then you have like the repeat offenders. So I wouldn't make a generous assumption about the repeat offender for the 55th time. No, that's just crazy, right? Like, so again, people are showing you who they are over and over again.
Yep. Okay. From Jill, I heard a motivational speaker once say that how he works out issues. Okay, I'm going to read this, but okay, is he goes to his partner and says, I have to laugh. I can't even read it with a straight face. This dude goes to his partner and says, I'm ready for you to apologize to me now. Who does that? I hope you got your money back from that gig. I'm in recovery. So Jill is saying, I'm in recovery, and that is not how we clean things up at all. Yeah, Jill, you are on it. If someone chooses to make amends, then they do. We work on ourselves and we do our own work, period. This felt enmeshed to me. Thoughts? Well, I hope I've made my thoughts clear. Terri, what are your thoughts on that?
Listen, no, just no. It's unhealthy. It's psychologically manipulative.
Yes.
It is projection, is putting responsibility on the other person, and then demanding when they're going to get to where you're like, what are you talking about? Jill said, I wrote to him and he never got back to me. Shocking, Jill. Shocking.
Tara, I constantly struggle with trying to teach lessons as I always think I have space for it. Thoughts. So I just want to try and interpret this clearly. So, Kara, are you saying that you think you have space to teach other people lessons? Let's go with that. We may be getting the question incorrect, but
definitely what you're saying.
Yeah. Isn't that, I find that exhausting for myself. Why do I teach by how I live. I've never, even my approach with parenting, I really can count on one hand the times I thought I need to teach my kid this lesson. And I've kind of felt not great about it.
It's just, here's the thing. It's overfunctioning, it's codependency. It's a way to avoid our own stuff. It is exhausting, Kara saying, and here's the thing. You have no idea. You literally have no idea what someone else needs to learn in this life.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is in pain and you could say, hey, this helped me, I don't know if it'll help you. That's like sharing, and that's community, and that's communion. Thinking that you even know, it's an illusion, Kara. It's an illusion. But the real damage for you, which is what I care about, is that it's just a deflection from whatever it is we really need to work on. If you're tired, how about just resting instead of teaching? And I know you, Kara, because I was you for a long time. I was. And then you get to a point where you're like, oh my God. And then I had a therapist who basically was like, hi, did someone die and make you God? Like, they didn't, and you really don't know. But what we also, when you really think about what's happening, if someone's in pain and they come to us and we want to teach them something, what we really want is we want their pain to stop so that our discomfort with their pain can stop. So it's one thing to be like, I just am like Mother Teresa, which I love to think of myself that way in my 20s, like, I'm just as generous like that. And then my therapist was like, what's actually happening is this. I was like, not nearly as sexy as what I said was happening, but it was actually the truth. And it was a relief when I was like, but wait, so I don't have to do that thing for my sister, or I don't have to save her from herself or whatever. And she was like, nah, and you can't. And it's literally, you're probably prolonging her being in this situation because you're giving her money, because you're like doing things that is stopping the feelings that will actually fuel her own transformation. I was like, wow, not only am I not being Mother Teresa, I'm actually impeding her process.
I can add something to this, which is part of my, let's just say, complexity is I have felt responsible for saving humanity. And that was part of my overfunctioning of like, I can help you. I have a lesson here. I have a lesson here. And when I stopped doing that, so for me, it was, I simply flipped the switch to, I'll only give advice if asked. If you want to know how I would do it, if you want advice, I'll give it. And then I'm going to take the next step and I'm going to frame it as, this is what I've done. I still can only speak from my experience. This is what worked for me. Take it or leave, And then I realized this profound place of discomfort, really almost anxiety inducing, from I could walk down the street and think, I could help you. I should help you, and you and you and you, and I have advice for you and advice for you. And just sit with discomfort that there's 7 billion people on the planet. My belief system is that we all come from the same source. We're all connected. And I can sit with that deep knowing and at the same time say, you've incarnated as that. And you know what I can do to help you? I can heal myself. And if we cross paths, maybe I can radiate some love to you, but I'm going to work on me and not be a burden on the system. Maybe sometimes I will be a burden on the system and have compassion for that, but just like, I'm going to heal myself on behalf of everybody else.
Yep.
And what a difference. Oh my God, I got so much more time on my hands. Okay. Angela, I have a toxic sister and father. I have placed healthy boundaries with them, and now they call me a victim and say I need medication to be well because I'm a big feeler. How do I proceed to have a relationship with them? Or do I continue to distance myself to maintain my own health?
Yes, that one.
Yes. So often the answer is in the question right
Yep.
there.
Yep. Because I think a lot of us feel guilty though, if we step back from family, if we step back from people who everyone's like, you should have a relationship with these people. Here's the thing, you're grown up, everything is voluntary. If you know
Mm-mm.
that they are unhealthy or toxic or unwell, and that it's very unlikely that they will change, and they're now making you the identified patient so they can come together against you being the problem. What is in it for you to stay connected to them? It's like pain, suffering. I mean, you told us what they were doing, so obviously it's bothering you and hurting your feelings. Let's not expect something different if this is what they've been doing. And my feeling is you have every right and really an obligation to self to limit exposure to that kind of toxicity.
And it doesn't mean you don't love them. Like you can take care of yourself and you can still have, again, Buddhist reference, metta. You can still have thoughts and prayers of loving kindness to
Mhm.
them and have your space. Doesn't mean you hate them. Loving yourself doesn't mean you are being cruel to somebody else. And it's not for you to say, you can't control somebody else's perception of yourself. So,
Yep.
okay, how do I, this is definitely a psychologist question. Unidia, can you have two transferences with one person, i.e. a partner that reminds you of your father and your sister?
Yep.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, you can, because those experiences that you have are stored in the same place in your unconscious mind. And so it's funny. I always look and say, who is this person? Like even with my husband, like where did all of this work before I got together with him, because we also are having we're also calling in the good stuff too, right? It's not just
Mhm,
the
mhm,
stuff that needs our attention.
mhm.
So yeah, you can.
Okay, how to set boundaries in a relationship where another female is um, having alpha-esque behavior towards my partner. So we've been together for 6 years, and my not feeling good enough activation was triggered. And I didn't know how to address this with the person, the alpha-esque female.
Hmm.
Do you get this
Well,
one?
my question about that would be, how is your partner? How does your partner interact with the alpha-esque female? That would be my question, because it's like you're talking about stepping over a line where what I got from your statement and your question is that there's a place where you reside in the relationship with your partner. And you're saying, or what I heard, is that there's someone else who's like, whoa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, how do you feel with alpha female? I don't know. I am an alpha female, so I feel it depends. It depends on if I respect them and if they're smart or not, and if we can. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if I know what an alpha female is, other than someone who is assertive, I guess, or a leader. But if it means bossy and a bully, then I'm not that. But so is that what you mean? Just tell me, did I get it right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll see
Um,
it. We'll see. Shelby will
got it
tell us.
right, she
We got
says.
it right.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So that's it. I would say you look at how your partner's interacting with them. And if there's something that your partner's doing that doesn't feel appropriate or doesn't make you feel prioritized or important or feels yuck, that's where the conversation is. Forget the other person. It's not about her. It's
Mm-hmm.
about you and your partner and what your agreements are, verbal and silent. Okay.
Okay, is from Jamie. Is there a phrase or a mantra to begin self-compassion? I can relate to the part about criticizing myself when I lash out.
Mhm.
I want to run with this one for a minute. So I have what I want to create what's called, I just call simply loving thoughts. But there's a bit of an art and a bit of a science to it. So a loving thought is comforting in the moment, but a loving thought isn't rebellious. So it's not a push against anybody else, because that's really just coming from the shadow saying,
Mhm.
I am worthy. I am love.
Mhm.
So A loving thought has to be something that makes you feel more spacious, feels like it comes from the most loving place in yourself, and it has to be believable.
Mm.
And you might have to stretch a little bit for it to be believable. And a loving thought doesn't have to be generated by us. So there's lots of mantras out there from great teachers and mystics and awakened ones who've got, so, like one loving thought that I often use for myself. This is inspired by A Course in Miracles. I am complete. I am safe. I am loved. I am loving. You can use that at any dinner party. You can use that either like 3 seconds and it can quell any panic. So
Mm-hmm.
does it feel like it comes from your heart? It's not pushing against the outside world, and it is deeply comforting. And then you design it yourself or you borrow it from somebody else.
Mm.
Question from Zoom user. Question about boundaries regarding the system itself. For example, with our bodies in regards to governmental systems and the current political rhetoric, I see and am hearing from so many friends suffering right now, especially with current shootings in Atlanta. Much appreciation. Question about boundaries regarding the system itself. This is a big question.
I don't know what the actual question is, though. Like, what do you do? How do we change the system? How do you protect yourself from a system that is not protecting you? How do you?
Mhm.
There's so many things that in our time, I don't know that we can cover those things.
Mhm.
And that's real, right?
Mhm.
So,
I relate to this struggle.
mhm.
So, the way I deal with this is I work to not feed the fear, about what the system could do, what the system is doing. If I'm going to be a victim of the system, I have to pull out of fear thinking, look at the freedoms and the genuine power I have over my mind, my body, my thoughts, my relationships, my medical freedom in my own life. And those freedoms are substantial. I look to other people in the past who have had their so-called freedoms removed and think if Nelson Mandela can feel sovereign after 27 years in a cell, I can find ways to tap my own sovereignty. And then I use my privilege and my level of consciousness to work on behalf of the freedoms of others who
Yep.
are oppressed. But I have to feel free myself and grateful for all the fluidity and health I have in my life in order to work on behalf of others. And I'm really mindful about my language around this. Like, I'm even uncomfortable these days with the word justice. I feel justice has been absconded by a lot of dark anger. So, I use terms like work on behalf of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
yes. And you know what? That's all easy to say too. I think you have to let your heart break open every day these days. Yeah.
Yep.
Jen, what about just taking a break from the person without sharing how they made you feel? Felt like the best way to care for myself, but is this passive? This is a great question. Just take a break, or should I speak up?
Here's the thing. I think that being withdrawn it depends on if you're being withdrawn in anger. I'm never going to say that it is the best course of action from a psychological point of view
Mm,
to remove yourself rather than talk. Now, if you need to remove yourself
mm,
for a period of time, so then you can speak up. Because here's the thing, if you remove yourself and you don't say the specifics, it's vague, right? And the person will be like, something happened when I saw them last Wednesday because I haven't heard from them since, and I just have no fucking idea what it is, but
mm,
I'm just going to be really nice and I'm going to go out of my way and maybe send flowers or maybe, do you know what I mean?
mm,
So part of it is owning what the actual specific problem was, the issue, the thing that didn't work for you, your beautifully unique boundary request,
mm,
and then making it.
mhm,
And part of the whole thing that you learn and the way that I've laid it out in the book is that there's a way to be proactive. So we learn, the people in your life. You've interacted with them, the ones you have established relationships with. So we create these proactive boundary plans, right? So the way you approach the person, what's happening inside of you, right? We don't want to approach someone with like dread, fear, aggression, because that is the thing that will lead. They will receive it. Whatever energy you bring with it, they're going to feel that. So we practice, we have language. I'll give you scripts, and in your downloadable thing, you're going to have some scripts where once you start saying it, you're like, this is okay. This is not that bad. I can make a simple request about whatever the thing is. And the fear, because there was another question about fear. Someone saying, I always feel so afraid. But when you do the pre-work, when you actually, because this whole system of learning how to become fluent in the art of boundaries is based on these 5 pillars of self-mastery that I've created over 2.5 decades, where you understand, like when we go into the basement, you understand why you're afraid. We reveal what I call your downloaded boundary blueprint, where you go, well, this makes total sense. Why? When I was a kid and when I didn't agree with what this dysfunctional parent did, and then they hurt me, they cut me out, they hit me, they did something, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. It makes it so much easier to make a plan, but you have to have what Dee was saying before, this compassion for your specific story and your journey to whatever your blueprint is right now, knowing that your boundary blueprint is just like an architectural blueprint for a house that someone else designed like 100 years ago. So it doesn't have to stay the same. Like you have the power to bring it from here to here. Don't worry, I'm a great GPS, I can help you. And then make the changes that you go, I don't want to say nothing when someone says something, or I don't want to overgive and then be bitter. Like I learned that is because that's a dysfunctional boundary, right?
And also so much beauty can happen. I mean, I think we've all had even like micro experiences of we say, oh, I felt that way, or can I tell you this? And they have no idea, or you realize you misunderstood, you're better for it. It's like you're just so mended and so much closer. I mean, imagine like being in a primary relationship, like a significant other, where you kept withdrawing, you kept not saying anything. You don't mend, you don't weave, you don't get deeper. I think that applies to friendships. It's like, I've let go of many relationships, female relationships, and of course, romantic relationships in my life with lots of analysis and like deep thought about it. And then there's been so many times where I'm so glad I said something, and we're better friends and we're more in love because of it. And I realized it was just my fear. I didn't want to be perceived as like needy or bitchy, or so much better. And you both go, oh my God,
Right. But Dee, what you're saying though is so common, and that I have so many people who will write into me and say, I just posted something the other day about, are you more likely to ghost someone or to end a relationship than you are to have a difficult conversation? And it's, it's sad. Like when we realize, right, that maybe we're doing that, it's like a bummer where you're like, oh, there are like 5 relationships. Maybe I could have had the closeness, but there is an acceptance that we can only be where we are, right, at the level of our own consciousness at the time. So I have faith. And a lot of times, and part of my process with clients and with groups is to mourn the way you wished it could have been, whether it's a romantic relationship or something else, but to really learn the gems of wisdom in that experience and take that with you into the next experience. But you're so right, Dee, that when you can actually have the real conversation and just tell the truth, you're like, oh my God, the things you love about that person become so amplified. You're like, oh, right, they are amazing,
So if I'm cleaning up, Laurie, if I'm cleaning up my side of the street and the other person isn't this is beautiful self-responsibility, and the other person isn't from my own perspective of what I need and want and will not tolerate, am I just remaining in ambivalence and I just need to set the boundary and let go? So the other person not doing the work in your own lens. What do you do?
Well, here's the thing. You have the conversation. So with repeat boundary offenders, right, I teach you that when we set boundaries, at some point, there has to be a consequence that we attach. So listen, I'm not like big on, let's give everybody an ultimatum, right? I'm not saying that, but
Mhm.
here's the truth. If you say to someone for 15 times, 20 times, 30 times, hey, do me a favor, let me know if you're going to be more than 15 minutes late so that I can whatever, and they don't do it. And if it really matters to you, that's a deal breaker. And you have a right to have a deal breaker. Before it's a deal breaker, you can say, hey, if you don't let me know, like you didn't last night, I'm eating without you. You can make your own food when you get home on your own. Like that will be the end of us getting together. So I think that there's something about attaching a consequence to the specific thing. And instead of having it be like, I'm doing the work and they're not, be specific about what's not working for you. You do an inventory and then have the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I would add, like, a consequence that's rooted in like it, like what's the self-love gesture? It can sound like it can feel like a pushback, like you're punishing the other person, but the loving thing for you to do is just eat dinner
Right.
for yourself.
Agreed. It's not like I'm going to do this and humiliate you. I'm just not going to sit here like an idiot waiting for you while I'm starving and you're 40 minutes late or whatever, you know?
So Carrie's asking about any ideas of how to rid our brains of rumination after expressing boundaries. And this
Yeah.
brings us to a great point. Of course, makes my heart so happy that so often in the book, you talk about meditation. I mean, if you want to rid your mind of something, you cleanse your mind, open your heart on a daily basis. So I want to read to everybody, because this is a great, we got to move into the final stretch here. So I'm reading from Life as a Boundary Boss. So back to you, assessing your self-care. These are Terri's words. As you know by now, good self-care is a crucial component to becoming a boundary boss. Use the checklist below. Feel free to add your own habit if it's not listed to get a snapshot of where your self-care is at the moment and where you need to make any adjustments. So self-care, also another phrase in our so-called industry that gets overused and misused. But this is a list of this is loving action for yourself. I move my body regularly. So everybody be asking yourself these questions, okay? I eat well and mindfully. I sleep soundly for at least 7 hours a night. I make sure to consume and stay hydrated, enough water a day. Listen, everybody. Do you rest when you're tired? Do you rest when you're tired? Do you eat when you're hungry? Do you pee when you need to pee? Do you have fun regularly? Is your financial house in order? Do you prioritize your comfort? And this is the answer to the question about ruminating after you've set boundaries. And I know that obsessiveness around, are they going to do what I need to have done? Are my needs going to be met? I should have said it this way. It's that mental looping. Here's the answer. I spend time in stillness and silence daily. And Terri fleshes that out a bit. For example, with meditation, breathing, energy work, etc. Because not everybody's going to want to meditate. Not everybody's going to want to pray, etc. But I'm going to just get preachy for a second and say, wisdom is only accessed through stillness. Somehow you have to have a practice of stillness. And it may be 5 minutes before you get out of bed every morning to speak to the God of your understanding. It may be moving your body with sacred intention. So we can move our body to have a better ass. We can move our body to be more flexible. But I would say, like, if you can add some sacredness to that, like to feel some higher connection, and just the most basic, just like you brush your teeth, you've got to practice like mind, I don't love this word, but mind hygiene. Like,
oh yeah,
you can't hear yourself think. You can't hear yourself. You can't hear the wisdom of your heart. All healthy boundary setting is going to come from the center of your heart, from your own loving kindness. If you don't have a practice of stillness every day, you're just going to get into the loop.
Yep. I will agree. And there's another part of the book where I talk about, there's a 48-hour rule where when you first start setting boundaries, you like super want to take it back. Every one you do, you're like, I didn't mean it. I'm only kidding. I could
Come
work
on over.
Yeah.
I'll work the 70 hours a week. It's okay. It's okay. It's all right. I don't mind the spicy food. That's right.
That's right. It's
Yeah,
cool.
move back in. It's good. I'm good. We're good. We're good. Yeah.
But, you know, I have a 48-hour rule where you're not going to do anything for 48 hours. And I promise you, I don't think one time ever in all these years I've been teaching this, has anyone been like, I went back and took it back. They were like, that's amazing. It felt so scary. But by the second day, it felt great. So I want to, you know, obviously I wrote a whole book on it. You guys know where to get it, but I also want to invite you to do something with me. Can I, Dee?
Yeah, go for it. All right.
You guys, this is like happening now. It's like, this is literally my first book ever. We are in the pre-order phase right now. And basically the booksellers, they decide what they're going to stock based on the pre-order. So if you're like, oh, hey, this is interesting, I think I like it, now would be the time to go order it. And what we're doing is we're having a Boundary Boss book launch team. So to be on the team and get a whole bunch, like I'm actually going to walk you through the book. You actually will get an early reader copy of the book. And I'm going to, for over 4 weeks, we're going to go through the book together. There's a whole bunch of things I'm giving as a gift. And if you think you're going to buy it anyway, why don't you do it now? BoundaryBossBook.com. And then you can be a part of the launch team. I'd really appreciate it if this speaks to you. If you're like, hey, I learned something and maybe I learned something else, because wow. Yeah.
Let me just give the extra plug for that in terms of timing. So lots of healing to be had in this process. I think more direct healing to go through a process with Terri. And then I just want to go for the straight entrepreneurship and supporting women who are creating good material, which is the pre-life of a book is very important to the writer's success. So all these numbers get counted. So having been in this place myself a number of times, if you're going to get it, don't get it 3 weeks after it comes out.
Please.
Support the writer now, because all this attention comes to it, and then more word of mouth and more foreign rights. And it's like anybody who identifies as a writer, a creative, an entrepreneur, or a human who needs healing, like do it now if you want to support your fellow female entrepreneurs.
Yep. And be a posse of women who are all doing this together, right? Because this is not just you. If you're like, oh my God, boundaries, help. Like, right. Hi, that's why I wrote a book, because everyone is like, help.
Okay. For the finale, in about 1 minute, Terri, can you tell us what is the opposite of self-abandonment? Because it's another pop phrase right now. So just tell us, like, what's the medicine for not standing by ourselves?
It is self-prioritizing. Mm-hmm. And we've been taught that that's wrong or bad. And yet the truth is, it's the only way to have healthy relationships, is that we prioritize ourselves. It doesn't mean we don't ever prioritize other people above it, but we know what our preferences, desires, limits, deal breakers are, and we honor them regularly. And we make decisions on a daily basis based on that information, not hoping someone else will do that for us. We do that for ourselves. And then you end up in healthy relationships. And then you end up, the subtitle of the book, right? Talking true, being seen, and finally living free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To that. To boundaries, loving kindness. Give us the URL again.
Well, we're emailing you. Well, boundarybossbook.com is where you're going to go. And if you've already purchased the book, then you're already in the group. You're going to be getting emails from us. That's where you're going to go to get the book and to prove that you did, basically. And then we're emailing you the recording of this, and I made a whole thing for you guys, actually just for you. So it's like a lesson thing, more deeply about gently setting boundaries, doing it with love, and a beautiful guide that'll also give you a bunch of scripts and stuff like that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. To love you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Go gently.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Love.
Bye.